Hi, my name is Bente, I'm the Norse Witch, and in this week's video I will tell you how you can communicate with your deities or also with other entities using a pendulum. Before we start out with the video, let me quickly shout out my patrons. Thank you really much to Timothy Murray, to Bjorn Algis, Ash, Lucy Cummings and Joss. Maybe you've seen it already, but I already filmed an introduction video to how to use a pendulum in general. I will put it up here, I think. Hopefully this time it will be right. If you haven't seen that video yet, then I would suggest you watch that video, because there I explain how to use a pendulum in general for whatever, and you will need to know that for this video. I wanted to film this video because apparently most of the people that come on my channel and subscribe are people that come from my deity work and deity worship for beginners videos. So I have a lot of people on here on my channel that are interested in deity work, which is great because I love deity work. But of course, a lot of people ask me, how can I communicate with deities if I'm not clairvoyant or clairaudient or anything like that? And I think using a pendulum is the easiest way to connect with a deity. So I wanted to, of course, film videos on that topic. So I hope that this will help you. Before I start out though, I want to mention that you should know how to protect yourself from trickster entities or even from malicious entities before you do any of this, because you will have to, of course, commune with an entity and talk to an entity. And if you don't know how to protect yourself from them, maybe you should consider learning that first. I just really want you to stay safe and to not attract any malicious entities or anything like that, because that would suck. If you want to make sure that you're protected from any unwanted entities, then of course you could cast a magic circle beforehand. That's what I do most of the times, because then I don't really have to wonder, is that entity I'm talking to actually the entity that I wanted to talk to, or will I maybe attract any additional entities when I talk to my deities? Who knows? When I cast a magic circle, I know that only the entity that I invited in can come into my circle, into my sacred space, and everyone else has to stay out. It's kind of like an energetic barrier that you put up. If you want to know how to do that, or learn how to do that, probably next week's video will be on that topic. But without further ado, let's hop into the juicy stuff. So I will assume right now that you have already taken all the protection measures, you have maybe cast a circle or done whatever you want to protect yourself and to make sure that you're not attracting any malicious entities while you are using your pendulum to communicate with your deities or any other entities. Then of course the first thing would be to call on the entity that you want to communicate with. I will just talk about deities from now on in this video because it's a little bit annoying to also always say entity or deity or whatever. So, of course, you have to call on your deity if they aren't present already, but most of the time they probably aren't. So you will have to call on them so that they come into your sacred space so that you can talk to them. Then, of course, it would make sense to kind of try to get a feeling for whether the deity actually is there. If it actually worked, especially if you are calling on a deity for the first time, then you will kind of have to learn a little bit how to make sure that the deity that you called on is actually there. Did it actually work? You could feel it. Maybe you feel an energetic shift, you feel maybe a shiver, you hear something, you could see images. Just see what comes up. If you see anything, if you feel anything. For me, it's most of the times whenever I work with energies, it's physical. So maybe I will feel a shiver or I will feel hot, anything like that. Of course, if you already know what the energy of your deity feels like, then it will be easier, of course. So for example, for me, Hell feels more cool and cold, and I always get a little shiver when I work with her. I feel more cold. Freya feels more hot. Thor feels more hot. So you can kind of feel into the energy of the deity, if that makes sense. But of course, that will differ for everyone. As I said, some people will maybe hear something, or they will see something, or if nothing comes up by itself, you can of course ask your pendulum whether it worked or not, whether the deity is present. And if you have watched my first part pendulum video, you will know how to do that, because you can just ask the pendulum, is the deity there? And if it says yes, great. If it says no, maybe call on them again. The next thing you will have to do is vetting the deity to make sure that this deity is actually the entity that you want to talk to and not any malicious entity, for example. Of course, you don't always have to do that. If you are already really skilled in casting a circle and calling entities into the circle, then you probably won't have to do that, because you have already cast a circle and you have called in this one deity. Then it can't be a malicious entity, because if you properly cast your circle, a malicious entity you didn't invite in can't come in, as I already said. So you won't always have to do that, but I would just suggest you do it either way, because it doesn't hurt doing it, right? So better safe than sorry. So how do you vet the deity? It's actually pretty simple. You can just take your pendulum and ask questions. Of course, you should know a lot of stuff about the deity that you want to talk to, because otherwise you can't vet them. Because what you will have to do is, for example, if I want to talk to Freya, for example, I could ask her, is your chariot led by cats? And if my pendulum says yes, great. If it says no, then the entity you're talking to is probably not Freya. Or I could just very easily just ask her, is your name Freya? Yes, great. No, probably not her. Or you could also ask questions that are not true. So I could ask her if her name is Odin. And if it says yes, probably not the best thing. And if it says no, okay, great. Continue with other questions. You can just ask a couple of questions. I usually ask I would say 4 to 6 questions. Increasingly harder questions, because for example, the name isn't that hard. Just ask a couple of questions. Research the deity beforehand. You should always research the deity before you communicate with them, but yeah. Research them so you know, maybe even prepare the questions beforehand, just write them down. That way it will just be easier. You don't have to wing it, you know. Oh, and of course, what do you do if you did cast a circle, you ask the deity some questions, and they give you the wrong answer? Ooh. Not good. Then probably your circle didn't work properly, because apparently another entity came in. So you will have to banish them out of your sacred space. Just banish them so that they're gone. The sooner you banish them, the better, because who knows what kind of entity that is. You don't want it to get attached to you. So probably it would be better to also learn how to banish first. But if you are now sure that the entity you're communicating with is the deity you want to talk to, then great! Next step. Now you can ask the deity whatever questions you like to ask. Of course, you can ask yes/no questions. That will probably be the easiest thing you can do. It would make sense to prepare the questions beforehand, think about what you want to ask them, because in my experience, you will be kind of excited to talk to the deity, and then the questions, you won't remember the questions maybe, and that will kind of suck. You can, of course, also use a pendulum board. There are even pendulum boards that kind of work like a Ouija board, that have the alphabet around. So you could actually ask questions like, what is your name? And they will have to spell it with the pendulum. But I think that's kind of advanced. So probably starting with yes and no questions is the easiest thing that you can do. Although finding the right questions is kind of hard, because you don't always want to know yes or no questions. You probably want to know something like what this deity likes to get as an offering. And then you will have to try out multiple things. So yes and no questions are a little bit tricky, but not everyone has a pendulum board or a pendulum mat. So yes or no questions will probably be the thing you will start out with. And yeah, as I said, that's of course not some kind of direct communication, especially with yes and no questions or with any prepared answers that the deity can give you on a pendulum board, because they just can't tell you anything else. They can only answer with the answers that they get provided. But I think it's still a pretty easy way to communicate with deities, because you don't have to be skilled in meditation or trance work, for example. I really like communicating with deities during trances or trance journeys, but I know it is not the easiest thing to learn, like getting into trances, like proper trances, and yeah, or doing automatic writing, anything like that. It isn't the easiest thing to do, so I think using a pendulum, while it is a little bit restricted, because you have to kind of prepare the answers that the deity can give you, it is still, I think, the easiest way you can communicate with deities. But I will say it again, please don't skip the protection part. I know it kind of sucks having to cast a circle or, I don't know, cleansing beforehand, anything like that, if you just want to get into communicating. But it is really important. And yes, of course, it can still work like 10 times, but then maybe the 11th time you do it without protection, you will get some kind of weird entity attached to you, and that will really suck. So please don't skip it. Please protect yourself. Please be safe. And yeah, that's it. It's fairly simple, I think, but I think it's also a fun way to communicate with deities. And yeah, please tell me in the comments in which way you communicate with deities. Maybe you ask them for signs, maybe you also use a pendulum, maybe you do it during meditation, whatever. There are a lot of ways to communicate with deities. So please tell me in the comments how you communicate with deities, because maybe there's a way that I'm not aware of yet and that I want to try out. Who knows? As always, I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to give a thumbs up and subscribe. And maybe you want to follow me on Instagram or check out my online shop. Or if you really enjoy my content, maybe you even want to consider becoming my patron. That would be really much appreciated. We have a really, really nice small community on Discord there too. It's really fun. And I will see you in the next video. Bye!